Woman gives birth to a fire-breathing dragon baby. How is this even possible? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Elena paced nervously in her small living room, her hands resting protectively over her growing belly. She had always wanted to be a mother, but this pregnancy had turned out to be nothing like she expected. It started normally enough: nausea, cravings, the occasional backache. But around the 4th month, things began to change. Drastically. She first noticed the strange warmth radiating from her stomach. At first, she thought it was just a symptom of pregnancy, her body adjusting to a new life growing inside her. But the heat became stronger, almost like holding a heating pad against her skin. By her 6th month, the warmth was so intense that her partner, Daniel, joked that she didn't need blankets at night anymore. "Elena, I swear," he said one evening, placing his hand on her belly, "you could cook an egg on this." He laughed, but the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. And then there was the glow. It started faintly, just a soft, almost imperceptible shimmer across her skin. But soon, every time she looked in the mirror, she swore her stomach seemed to emit a golden light, as if a small sun was radiating beneath her skin. The doctors had no answers. Blood tests, ultrasounds, and scans all came back normal. To them, the baby seemed perfectly healthy. But Elena knew something was different, something extraordinary. The cravings were another mystery. Most pregnant women craved pickles or chocolate, but Elena's desires were stranger. She found herself wanting smoked foods, charred vegetables, burnt toast, anything with a hint of fire. Once, she caught herself staring longingly at the flame of a candle, her mouth watering as if it were food. "Elena, are you okay?" Daniel asked one night as she stood in the kitchen, staring at the open flame of the gas stove. She shook her head, snapping out of her daze. "Just tired, I guess." But the truth was, she felt drawn to fire in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just a craving, it was a need. By the 8th month, the changes were undeniable. The heat had spread beyond her belly, radiating to her entire body. Her skin glowed faintly even in the dark, and she found herself waking up drenched in sweat. The doctors were baffled but dismissed her symptoms as hormonal fluctuations. "It's nothing to worry about," one doctor assured her. "Every pregnancy is different." But Elena wasn't convinced. Something deep inside her whispered that this was no ordinary pregnancy. She could feel it in the way the baby moved, not in soft kicks, but in powerful surges, almost like waves of energy pulsing through her. One night, as she lay in bed, a sharp pain jolted her awake. It wasn't like the usual discomfort she had grown used to. It was searing, almost like her insides were burning. She clutched her stomach, breathing heavily as Daniel sat up beside her. "Elena, what's wrong?" he asked, panic in his voice. "I don't know," she gasped. Daniel ran to grab the phone, but before he could dial, the pain subsided, leaving Elena trembling but otherwise unharmed. She glanced down at her stomach, and for the first time, she saw it, a faint trail of smoke rising from her skin. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Something's not right." The next morning, they rushed to the hospital. Elena was admitted immediately, her unusual symptoms raising alarm among the medical staff. The doctors performed another round of tests, this time with more urgency. But just like before, they found nothing out of the ordinary. "Your baby's heart rate is strong," the lead doctor said, trying to reassure her. "Whatever's happening, it doesn't seem to be harming the baby." Elena wasn't sure if she should feel relieved or more worried. She lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What was happening to her? And what kind of child was she about to bring into the world? The labor came suddenly, 2 weeks before her due date. Elena was at home, folding tiny onesies in the nursery, when the first contraction hit. It was unlike anything she had ever felt, an overwhelming heat surging through her body, followed by an intense, fiery pain. "Daniel," she called out, clutching the edge of the crib for support. "It's time." Daniel grabbed the hospital bag and helped her to the car, his own panic barely contained. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity, with Elena gripping the seatbelt and breathing through the pain. Every contraction felt like fire spreading through her veins, and she swore she could feel heat radiating off her skin. By the time they reached the hospital, Elena was drenched in sweat, her face pale but determined. The medical staff sprang into action, wheeling her into a delivery room and hooking her up to monitors. The delivery room was tense, the air filled with the sounds of beeping machines and hurried voices. Elena gritted her teeth, clutching Daniel's hand as the contractions grew closer together. The heat in the room was palpable, almost suffocating, and several nurses wiped their foreheads as they worked. "Her temperature is spiking," one nurse said, her voice tinged with alarm. "She's at 104 degrees. Keep her hydrated," the doctor ordered. "And get ready, this baby is coming fast." Elena cried out as another contraction ripped through her, the heat intensifying to the point where the metal rails of the bed felt warm to the touch. And then, with one final push, the room fell silent. For a moment, everything was still. Elena's vision blurred with exhaustion as she struggled to catch her breath. And then she heard it, a sound that sent chills down her spine. A roar. Not a cry, but a deep, guttural roar that filled the room and echoed off the walls. Elena's heart raced as she turned her head, her eyes widening in disbelief at what she saw. The baby wasn't like anything the doctors had ever seen. Small, scaly wings were folded against its back, and its skin glimmered with a reddish hue, almost like molten lava. Tiny claws flexed on its hands, and its eyes, golden and luminous, seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. As the baby took its first breath, a small burst of flame erupted from its mouth, startling the medical staff and setting off a fire alarm. Chaos erupted in the delivery room as nurses scrambled to contain the flames, while the doctors stared at the baby in stunned silence. Elena, however, felt none of the fear that gripped everyone else in the room. As she reached out to hold her child, tears streamed down her face, not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of love and awe. "My baby," she whispered, cradling the tiny creature in her arms. The heat from its body was intense, but to Elena, it felt comforting, like the warmth of a hearth on a cold night. "You're perfect." Daniel, standing beside her, looked between the baby and Elena, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. "Elena, is that the dragon?" Elena nodded, her voice steady. "Yes. And he's ours." The days following the visit from Agent Miller were tense. Elena and Daniel lived in constant fear that someone would show up unannounced to take Ignis away. They took extra precautions, installing security cameras around the house and keeping the curtains drawn at all times. Every knock at the door sent a jolt of anxiety through Elena, who rarely left Ignis's side. Despite the turmoil, life with Ignis brought moments of joy that reminded Elena why she was fighting so hard for him. One evening, as the family sat in the living room, Ignis let out a series of chirping sounds, his wings fluttering excitedly as he tried to lift himself off the ground. "Look at him," Daniel said, grinning. "He's trying to fly." Elena knelt beside Ignis, her heart swelling with pride. "You're doing amazing, sweetheart," she said, clapping softly as Ignis flapped his tiny wings. Though he didn't quite manage to take off, his determination was unmistakable. Later that night, as Elena rocked Ignis to sleep, she whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. You're my miracle." The media frenzy continued to escalate, with reporters camping outside their home and helicopters occasionally flying overhead. The attention brought both support and criticism. Some people rallied behind the Carsons, calling Ignis a blessing and a symbol of the extraordinary. Others, however, expressed fear, calling for the government to intervene. Elena avoided the news as much as possible, but one day, while scrolling through her phone, she stumbled across a video of a talk show panel discussing Ignis. One of the guests, a biologist, argued that Ignis was a scientific marvel who could unlock secrets about evolution and genetics. Another guest, a politician, warned of the potential dangers of allowing a fire-breathing creature to live among humans. The comments section was a battlefield of opinions. Some praised Elena for her bravery, while others accused her of being irresponsible for keeping Ignis at home. Elena put down her phone, her hands trembling. "Why can't they just let us be?" she muttered to herself. One afternoon, There was another knock at the door. Elena peeked through the window and saw a woman standing on the porch, holding a notebook and wearing a warm smile. She didn't look like a government agent or a reporter, but Elena was still wary. "Who is it?" Daniel asked, approaching from behind. "She says her name is Dr. Harper," Elena replied. "She's a scientist?" Daniel frowned. "Do you think we should talk to her?" Elena hesitated before nodding. "Let's see what she wants." They opened the door cautiously, and Dr. Harper introduced herself. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said gently. "I'm a geneticist specializing in unique biological phenomena. I've been following your story, and I wanted to offer my help." Elena narrowed her eyes. "We've had plenty of people offer their help, and most of them just want to take Ignis away from us." Dr. Harper shook her head. "I don't want to take him away. I want to help you understand him, on your terms. I know how overwhelming this must be, and I want you to know that not everyone sees Ignis as a threat." Elena studied the woman's face, searching for any signs of deception. There was none. "What kind of help are you offering?" she asked cautiously. "I can run tests here in your home to learn more about Ignis without taking him out of his environment," Dr. Harper explained. "And I can help you navigate some of the challenges you're facing, whether it's dealing with the media or the government." Daniel exchanged a look with Elena. "It's your call," he said. After a long pause, Elena nodded. But if you do anything to hurt him, you're out?" Dr. Harper smiled. "I wouldn't dream of it." Over the next few weeks, Dr. Harper became a trusted ally. She visited the house regularly, conducting non-invasive tests on Ignis and sharing her findings with Elena and Daniel. She discovered that Ignis's fire breathing was triggered by a specialized gland in his throat, which produced a flammable substance that ignited when exposed to air. She also found that his scales were composed of a unique material that provided insulation against extreme heat. "He's perfectly healthy," Dr. Harper said during one visit. "And his physiology is fascinating. He's unlike anything I've ever seen." Elena smiled, stroking Ignis's tiny wings. "He's one of a kind." Dr. Harper nodded. "Yes. And he's lucky to have parents who love him so much." As Ignis grew, his abilities became more pronounced. He began breathing small flames more frequently, and his wings grew stronger, allowing him to hover a few inches off the ground. Elena and Daniel adjusted their home to accommodate his needs, turning the backyard into a safe space where he could practice flying and breathing fire without causing damage. One afternoon, while Ignis was playing outside, a group of neighborhood children gathered near the fence, watching in awe as he hovered in the air and let out a small puff of flame. "Whoa! Is that a dragon?" one boy asked, his eyes wide. Elena approached the fence, smiling nervously. "This is Ignis," she said. "He's special." The children giggled and waved at Ignis, who chirped in response. For the first time, Elena saw hope that Ignis might one day be accepted for who he was. But not everyone shared the children's wonder. One evening, as Elena and Daniel sat on the porch, a car drove by slowly, and someone shouted, "Get rid of that thing before it burns down the neighborhood." Elena's heart sank, her protective instincts flaring. "Why can't they see him the way we do?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniel wrapped an arm around her. "People fear what they don't understand. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting for him." The turning point came during a community event at the local park. Despite their fears, Elena and Daniel decided to bring Ignis, hoping to show their neighbors that he wasn't a threat. Ignis, now about the size of a large dog, walked beside Elena, his wings folded neatly against his back. At first, people stared, whispering among themselves. But when a young girl approached Ignis, holding out a flower, he surprised everyone by gently taking it in his tiny claws and chirping happily. The crowd watched in awe as Ignis interacted with the children, letting them touch his scales and marvel at his glowing eyes. "He's not scary," one child said. "He's cool." Elena smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that Ignis could find acceptance. That hope was solidified later that evening when a fire broke out at a nearby house. The flames spread quickly, trapping a family inside. As firefighters worked to control the blaze, Ignis suddenly darted forward, his instincts kicking in. "Ignis, No, Elena called out, but it was too late. He spread his wings and flew toward the house, disappearing into the smoke. The crowd gasped as minutes passed with no sign of him. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Ignis emerged from the flames, carrying a small child in his claws. The crowd erupted into cheers as Ignis gently placed the child on the ground, chirping softly. Elena ran to him, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. "You're a hero," she whispered. From that moment on, everything changed. Ignis was no longer seen as a threat, he was a symbol of courage and hope. The community rallied around the Carsons, and even the government backed off, recognizing that Ignis was more than just a curiosity, he was a miracle. The rescue of the small child by Ignis became the talk of the entire nation. News outlets replayed the footage over and over, the young dragon diving into the roaring flames, his shimmering scales glowing brightly through the smoke, and finally emerging with the child clutched safely in his claws. The sight of him gently placing the child on the ground, chirping as if to say, "You're safe now," captured the hearts of millions. For the first time since Ignis's birth, the world seemed to see him not as a threat, but as a hero. At home, Elena sat on the couch, scrolling through the hundreds of messages flooding her social media accounts. Messages of support poured in from people all over the world. "Your son is amazing," one message read. "Thank you for showing us that miracles still exist." "Ignis is a gift," said another. "He's proof that we shouldn't fear what we don't understand." Elena wiped away a tear, her heart swelling with gratitude. For so long, she had fought to protect Ignis, to convince people that he was more than his fire-breathing or his wings. Now, it seemed the world was finally starting to understand what she had known all along. Ignis was special, and he was meant to be here. The following week, the mayor of their town visited the Carsons to present Ignis with a special medal of bravery. A small ceremony was held in the park, where the fire had been extinguished, and dozens of families gathered to witness the event. The mayor stood at a podium, holding a small gold medal with a flame design etched into its surface. "Today, we honor Ignis," she began, her voice warm and sincere. "This remarkable young creature showed us what true courage looks like. In the face of danger, he acted without hesitation to save a life. Ignis reminds us all that heroes come in many forms, and that we should embrace the extraordinary among us." The crowd erupted into applause as Elena walked to the podium, holding Ignis, who chirped happily and flapped his wings. The mayor placed the medal around Ignis's neck, and he puffed up proudly, letting out a small, harmless puff of smoke that made everyone laugh. Elena leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but emotional. "Ignis has always been my miracle," she said. "And now, I see that he's a miracle for all of us. Thank you for finally seeing him the way I do." The applause grew louder, and for the first time, Elena felt a sense of peace. The world was changing, and her son was at the center of it. But not everyone was ready to accept Ignis. A small but vocal group continued to express fear and skepticism, claiming that Ignis's powers made him a danger to society. "What if he loses control?" one commentator argued during a televised debate. "What if next time, instead of saving someone, he accidentally burns someone? Are we willing to take that risk?" Elena watched the debate with clenched fists, anger bubbling inside her. Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't let them get to you," he said. "Ignis has already proven who he is." "But they're still so blinded by fear," Elena said, her voice shaking. "How many times does he have to prove himself before they stop treating him like a monster?" "Some people will always be afraid of what they don't understand," Daniel said. "But that doesn't mean we stop fighting for him." Elena decided it was time to take control of the narrative. She agreed to sit down for an exclusive interview with a well-known journalist, hoping to share Ignis's story in her own words. The interview took place in their home, with Ignis perched beside Elena, his wings neatly folded as he curiously observed the cameras. The journalist, a kind woman named Rebecca, began with gentle questions about Ignis's birth and the challenges Elena and Daniel had faced. Elena spoke candidly, recounting the fear, the judgment, and the constant battle to protect her son. "Ignis isn't just a dragon," Elena said, her voice filled with conviction. "He's my son. He has a heart, emotions, and a personality. He feels joy, love, and even sadness. And he's shown us all what it means to be brave. I don't see a monster when I look at him, I see a miracle. Rebecca smiled warmly. What would you say to those who still fear him? Elena took a deep breath. I would say that fear comes from not understanding. Ignis is different, yes, but different doesn't mean dangerous. He's taught me that we're all stronger when we embrace what makes us unique. The interview aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, and even some skeptics admitted that Elena's words had made them rethink their perspective. For the first time, Elena felt like the tide was truly turning. Meanwhile, Ignis continued to grow, not just physically, but emotionally as well. He was now the size of a medium-sized dog, his wings strong enough to carry him short distances. He spent his days exploring the backyard, chirping happily as he practiced flying and occasionally letting out small bursts of fire. One afternoon, as Elena watched Ignis play, she noticed something extraordinary. Ignis had discovered how to control his fire breathing more precisely, creating small rings of fire in the air and watching them dissipate. He seemed proud of his newfound skill, looking back at Elena as if seeking her approval. You're amazing, Elena said, clapping. You're going to change the world, Ignis. But the peace didn't last long. One evening, Elena received a call from Dr. Harper, who sounded unusually urgent. Elena, I've been monitoring the online chatter about Ignis, and there's something you need to know. There's a group petitioning the government to intervene. They're claiming Ignis is a potential threat and demanding he be taken into custody. Elena's heart sank. But we've shown them he's not dangerous. He saved a life. I know, Dr. Harper said gently. But fear is a powerful thing. You need to be prepared for the possibility that they might try to take action. Elena hung up the phone, her mind racing. She couldn't let them take Ignis. She wouldn't. That night, Elena and Daniel devised a plan. They reached out to their supporters, rallying the community to stand with them. The next morning, dozens of people gathered outside the Carson home, holding signs that read, "Protect Ignis" and "Love over Fear." The demonstration gained national attention, with reporters covering the story and amplifying the message. Ignis isn't just a dragon, he's a symbol of hope, one supporter told a reporter. He's shown us that being different isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Even the mayor joined the demonstration, standing beside the Carsons and publicly declaring her support. Ignis has done more good in his short life than most people do in a lifetime, she said. We should be celebrating him, not fearing him. The pressure worked. The government issued a statement announcing that they would not pursue custody of Ignis, acknowledging that he posed no immediate threat and that his family had the right to raise him. Elena broke down in tears of relief when she heard the news. We did it, she whispered, holding Ignis close. We fought for you and we won. Daniel hugged her tightly. He's safe. That's all that matters. As time passed, Ignis continued to thrive, his story inspiring people around the world. Schools used him as an example to teach children about acceptance and embracing differences, while scientists marveled at his existence and what he represented. Elena often reflected on how far they had come. From the moment she first felt that strange warmth in her belly, she had known Ignis was extraordinary. But now, seeing the way he brought people together, she realized he was more than that. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of love. Months had passed since the government declared Ignis safe to remain with his family, but the world's fascination with the fire-breathing dragon baby had only grown. People from all over the globe traveled to the Carsons' small town, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ignis or hear the remarkable story of his birth and life. Elena and Daniel worked hard to protect their son's privacy, but they also understood the importance of sharing their journey with others to help normalize Ignis's existence. To strike a balance, the family began hosting occasional community days in a secure area of their backyard, where supporters and curious visitors could meet Ignis under controlled conditions. Elena made sure these events were safe and comfortable for Ignis, who seemed to thrive in the attention, especially from children. On one sunny afternoon, Ignis sat in the grass, his wings folded neatly behind him, as a small group of children gathered around him. One of the children, a shy boy named Lucas, hesitated before stepping forward. "Can I touch his wings?" he asked, glancing nervously at Elena. "You can ask Ignis," Elena replied with a smile. "He'll let you know if he's okay with it." Lucas crouched down, looking into Ignis's glowing golden eyes. "Can I touch your wings?" he asked softly. Ignis chirped in response, tilting his head as if to say yes. Lucas reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing against the smooth, warm surface of Ignis's wings. His face lit up with wonder. "He's amazing!" Lucas exclaimed, turning to his parents, who stood watching from a distance. Elena's heart swelled as she watched the scene unfold. Every interaction like this felt like a victory, a step toward a world that would one day fully accept her son for who he was. Despite the growing support, not everyone shared the community's enthusiasm. A small but vocal group of protesters occasionally gathered outside the Carson home, holding signs that read, "Dragons don't belong here" and "Protect humanity." They chanted slogans about safety and accused the Carsons of endangering the town. Elena did her best to ignore them, but their presence weighed heavily on her. One evening, as she put Ignis to bed, she couldn't help but worry about his future. "How long will we have to fight for him to be accepted?" she asked Daniel later that night as they sat together on the couch. Daniel sighed, wrapping an arm around her. "As long as it takes," he said. "But look at how far we've already come. People love Ignis. He's changing hearts every day." Elena nodded, trying to hold on to that hope. "I just want him to have a normal life," she said softly. "He'll have his own version of normal," Daniel replied. "And we'll be there every step of the way." The Carsons' lives took an unexpected turn when they received a letter from a prestigious scientific institute. The letter, written by Dr. Emilia Vargas, one of the world's leading experts on evolutionary biology, invited Elena and Daniel to bring Ignis to a conference where she planned to present groundbreaking research on his existence. "I understand your hesitations," Dr. Vargas wrote, "but my goal is not to treat Ignis as a specimen. I want to celebrate him as a unique and extraordinary being who challenges everything we thought we knew about biology." This conference could help the world see Ignis in a new light. Elena was torn. On one hand, she wanted to protect Ignis from further scrutiny. On the other, she saw the potential for the conference to shift public perception even further in his favor. "What do you think?" she asked Daniel as they read the letter together. "It's a risk," Daniel admitted. "But it could also be an opportunity to show the world who Ignis really is." Elena looked over at Ignis, who was curled up on the living room rug, fast asleep. His small wings twitched as he dreamed, and a faint trail of smoke rose from his nostrils. "We'll do it," she said finally, "but only if we can set clear boundaries. Ignis comes first." The conference was held in a sprawling convention center in a nearby city. The Carsons arrived early in the morning, greeted by Dr. Vargas and her team, who had gone to great lengths to ensure Ignis's comfort and safety. A special enclosure had been set up with heat lamps and fireproof materials, allowing Ignis to rest and play while the conference attendees listened to Dr. Vargas's presentation. The auditorium was packed with scientists, journalists, and curious onlookers. Dr. Vargas stood at the podium, her voice confident and commanding as she began her talk. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we are here today to discuss one of the most extraordinary phenomena in modern history, the birth of Ignis, a being unlike any other." She shared details about Ignis's unique physiology, emphasizing his intelligence, his ability to bond with humans, and the incredible rescue that had made headlines. "Ignis is not a threat," she concluded. "He is a wonder, a reminder that the natural world is full of mysteries we have yet to uncover. He challenges us to rethink what is possible and to embrace the unknown with curiosity rather than fear." As the audience erupted into applause, Elena felt a surge of pride. Dr. Vargas had captured everything she had wanted the world to understand about her son. After the presentation, attendees were invited to meet Ignis under strict supervision. Elena stayed close to him the entire time, watching as people approached with awe and fascination. Many asked questions about what it was like to raise a dragon, while others simply marveled at his presence. One journalist, a young woman with a kind smile, crouched down to Ignis's level. "Hi, Ignis," she said gently. "Can I take your picture?" Ignis chirped and tilted his head, as if giving his approval. The journalist snapped a photo and looked up at Elena. Thank you for sharing him with us, she said. He's incredible. Elena smiled. He's my heart, she said simply. The conference marked a turning point for Ignis and the Carsons. Dr. Vargas's presentation went viral, sparking a wave of positive media coverage that further cemented Ignis's status as a symbol of hope and wonder. People began to see him not as a threat, but as a reminder of the extraordinary possibilities of life. Elena and Daniel finally felt a sense of peace. They knew there would always be challenges, but they also knew they had built a community of supporters who would stand by their side. One evening, as the family sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ignis spread his wings and leapt into the air. He hovered for a moment, his wings catching the golden light, before landing gracefully on the grass. Elena clapped, laughing as Ignis puffed out a small burst of fire in celebration. "You're amazing," she said, pulling him into a hug. "Never forget that." Ignis chirped happily, nuzzling against her. In that moment, Elena felt a deep sense of gratitude for her son, for the journey they had been on, and for the love that had carried them through. As the weeks passed following the conference, Ignis's fame continued to grow. The viral presentation by Dr. Vargas sparked debates, discussions, and curiosity across the globe. People began to send letters, gifts, and even artwork inspired by Ignis, all addressed to the Carson family. Many of these were from children who saw Ignis as a hero, a reminder that being different wasn't something to fear, it was something to celebrate. One particular letter stood out to Elena. It was from a young boy named Ethan, who shared how Ignis's story gave him the courage to be himself. "Ignis is so cool," Ethan wrote in his uneven handwriting. "Sometimes people make fun of me because I wear glasses and talk funny, but my mom says I'm special, just like Ignis. I hope I get to meet him one day." Elena's heart melted as she read the letter. She had always hoped Ignis would have a positive impact, but seeing how he inspired others filled her with a profound sense of purpose. "We should invite Ethan to visit," she told Daniel later that evening, holding up the letter. "Ignis would love meeting him." Daniel smiled. "That's a great idea. Let's reach out to his family." A week later, Ethan and his parents arrived at the Carson home. Ethan was a shy, freckled boy with large glasses that slid down his nose. He clutched a stuffed dragon tightly in his hands as he stepped out of the car, his eyes wide with wonder. Elena greeted them warmly, kneeling down to Ethan's level. "Hi, Ethan. I'm so glad you're here," she said. "Ignis is excited to meet you." Ethan grinned nervously. "Really?" "Really," Elena assured him, leading him to the backyard where Ignis was lounging in the sun. As soon as Ignis saw Ethan, he chirped and fluttered his wings, clearly intrigued by the boy. Ethan's jaw dropped. "He's real," he exclaimed, clutching his stuffed dragon tighter. Elena laughed. "Of course he's real. Go on, say hello." Ethan approached cautiously, holding out his hand. Ignis tilted his head, then stepped forward and nuzzled Ethan's palm. The boy's face lit up with pure joy. "He likes you," Elena said, watching the interaction with a smile. For the next hour, Ethan and Ignis played together in the yard. Ethan giggled as Ignis flapped his wings and puffed out tiny bursts of flame, careful not to get too close. By the time Ethan left, he was beaming, and his parents thanked the Carsons profusely. "You've made his entire year," Ethan's mother said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for sharing Ignis with us." Elena hugged her. "Ignis has a way of bringing out the best in people," she said. "It's our pleasure." As Ignis continued to grow, so did his abilities. His wings became stronger, allowing him to soar higher and farther. His fire breathing, once sporadic and unpredictable, became more controlled. Elena and Daniel marveled at his progress, though they also recognized the challenges that came with raising a creature as extraordinary as Ignis. One day, while playing in the backyard, Ignis accidentally set a tree on fire. Elena rushed outside with a fire extinguisher, her heart pounding as she doused the flames. Ignis looked up at her with wide, guilty eyes, his wings drooping. "It's okay, sweetheart," Elena said gently, kneeling beside him. "Accidents happen." Ignis let out a soft chirp, leaning into her for comfort. Elena wrapped her arms around him, her resolve strengthening. She knew that teaching Ignis to control his powers would be an ongoing process, but she was determined to help him every step of the way. The media's interest in Ignis eventually led to an invitation that the Carsons couldn't ignore, an appearance on a popular late-night talk show. At first, Elena was hesitant. She worried about how Ignis would handle the bright lights and bustling energy of a television studio. But after discussing it with Daniel and Dr. Harper, she decided it was an opportunity to show the world the gentle, loving side of Ignis. When the night of the show arrived, the family was escorted into the studio through a private entrance to avoid the throngs of fans and reporters outside. Ignis clung to Elena's side, his eyes darting around nervously as they entered the brightly lit backstage area. "It's okay, baby," Elena whispered, stroking his wings. "I'm right here." The host, a charismatic man named James, greeted them warmly. "I can't tell you how excited we are to have you here," he said. "Ignis is going to steal the show." "He usually does," Daniel replied with a chuckle. When it was time for their segment, the Carsons walked onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. Ignis hesitated at first, but as the audience clapped and cheered, he seemed to relax, puffing out a small burst of fire that elicited delighted laughter from the crowd. During the interview, Elena shared their journey, from Ignis's extraordinary birth to the challenges and triumphs they had experienced as a family. James asked thoughtful questions, and the audience hung on every word. At one point, James leaned toward Ignis, holding out a marshmallow on a stick. "Can you help me toast this?" he asked with a grin. Ignis chirped, then let out a small, controlled flame, perfectly toasting the marshmallow. The audience erupted into cheers, and Ignis puffed out his chest proudly. "That's the best marshmallow I've ever had," James declared, earning more laughter. By the end of the segment, it was clear that Ignis had won over the audience. As the Carsons left the stage, Elena felt a sense of relief and pride. They had shown the world that Ignis was more than his abilities, he was a part of their family, and he was loved. The talk show appearance marked another turning point for the Carsons. Public support for Ignis reached new heights, with people from all walks of life rallying behind him. A crowdfunding campaign was launched to create a sanctuary where Ignis could live freely while still being close to his family. The campaign quickly surpassed its goal, and construction began on a sprawling property just outside town. The sanctuary, designed by experts in both animal habitats and fire safety, featured wide open spaces for Ignis to fly, play, and explore. It also included a visitor's center where people could learn about Ignis and his story, fostering education and understanding. When the sanctuary was completed, the Carsons held a grand opening event, inviting the community to celebrate. Ignis, now large enough to fly short distances with ease, soared above the crowd, letting out joyful chirps as people cheered below. "He's happy," Elena said, watching him with tears in her eyes. "That's all I've ever wanted." The sanctuary became a beacon of hope and acceptance, attracting visitors from around the world. Schools organized field trips, families came to marvel at Ignis, and scientists continued to study him, not as a specimen, but as a unique and remarkable being. Elena and Daniel remained deeply involved in the sanctuary's operations, ensuring that Ignis's needs were always prioritized. They also began advocating for broader acceptance of differences, sharing their story at conferences and community events. Through it all, Ignis remained the heart of their family, his bond with Elena as strong as ever. On quiet evenings, he would curl up beside her, his warm body radiating a comforting heat as she read to him or told him stories about his journey. "You've changed the world, Ignis," she would whisper, stroking his wings. "And you're just getting started." As Ignis adjusted to life at the sanctuary, it became clear that he was thriving in his new environment. The wide open fields gave him the freedom to stretch his wings and soar to heights he had never reached before, while the fireproof play areas allowed him to practice his fire-breathing skills without fear of causing damage. Elena watched him every day, her heart swelling with pride as he grew stronger, more confident, and more curious about the world around him. The sanctuary quickly became a symbol of unity and acceptance, attracting visitors from all over the world. Tourists, scientists, and journalists flocked to see Ignis in person, while children eagerly lined up to participate in educational programs that taught them about the importance of embracing differences. One afternoon, Elena stood on the observation deck, watching Ignis play with a group of children who had come on a field trip. He was chasing a large, flame-resistant ball across the field, his wings flapping excitedly as the children cheered him on. "He's incredible," a voice said behind her. Elena turned to see Dr. Harper, who had become a close friend and regular visitor to the sanctuary. "He really is," Elena replied, smiling. "Every day he surprises me." Dr. Harper nodded. "You've given him a wonderful life, Elena. And in doing so, you've inspired so many others. Ignis isn't just a symbol of hope, he's proof that love and acceptance can overcome fear." Elena looked back at Ignis, who had just stopped to nuzzle one of the children. "I'm just grateful the world finally sees him for who he is," she said. Despite the overwhelming support, there were still challenges to face. Not everyone embraced Ignis with open arms, and the small but vocal group of critics continued to protest outside the sanctuary. They carried signs with messages like "Dragons are dangerous" and "Protect our future," their voices rising in chants that echoed across the property. Elena refused to let their negativity dampen her spirits, but she couldn't deny the toll it took on her. One evening, as she sat on the porch with Daniel, she sighed heavily. "Why can't they just let us live in peace?" she asked. Daniel took her hand, his gaze steady. "Because they're afraid of what they don't understand. But we've faced fear before and we've overcome it. We'll do it again." Elena nodded, drawing strength from his words. "We've come too far to let them stop us now." The protests took a dramatic turn when a group of demonstrators tried to break into the sanctuary one night. Security alarms blared, and the Carsons were woken by frantic calls from the staff. By the time they arrived at the scene, the intruders had been apprehended, but the incident left Elena shaken. Ignis, who had been safely locked in his enclosure, seemed oblivious to the commotion. He chirped happily when Elena arrived, nuzzling her shoulder as if sensing her distress. "You're safe," Elena whispered, wrapping her arms around him. "That's all that matters." The incident prompted the Carsons to tighten security around the sanctuary, hiring additional staff and installing more advanced surveillance systems. They also worked closely with local law enforcement to ensure Ignis's safety, knowing they couldn't take any chances. Amid the challenges, there were moments of triumph that reminded Elena why their fight was worth it. One day, a group of children from a school for students with disabilities visited the sanctuary. Many of the children used wheelchairs or had other physical limitations, but their faces lit up with joy as they watched Ignis fly overhead. One girl, a 10-year-old named Lily, was particularly captivated. She had lost her legs in an accident and used a wheelchair, but her spirit was unbreakable. As Ignis landed in front of her, she reached out with trembling hands, her eyes wide with wonder. "Hi, Ignis," she said softly. "You're beautiful." Ignis chirped and lowered his head, allowing Lily to touch his warm, scaled nose. Tears streamed down her face as she stroked him, and her parents stood nearby, overcome with emotion. "Thank you," Lily's mother said to Elena. "This means the world to her." Elena smiled, her own eyes misty. "Ignis has a way of bringing out the best in people," she said. As the visit continued, Lily shared her dream of one day flying, something she had thought would never be possible after her accident. Inspired by her story, the sanctuary staff surprised her with a special experience, a ride in a hot air balloon. From the sky, Lily waved down at Ignis, who chirped excitedly and flapped his wings as if cheering her on. The moment was captured on video and quickly went viral, touching hearts around the world. Messages poured in, praising the sanctuary for its efforts to create such meaningful experiences. As Ignis grew older, his abilities continued to evolve. His fire breathing became more controlled and precise, and his wings grew strong enough to carry him long distances. Dr. Harper and her team worked closely with the Carsons to ensure Ignis could safely explore his capabilities without endangering himself or others. One day, during a training session, Ignis performed a remarkable feat that left everyone speechless. As he soared through the air, he released a controlled burst of flame, creating a ring of fire that hovered briefly before dissipating. The staff erupted into cheers, and Ignis chirped proudly, clearly pleased with himself. "He's learning so quickly," Dr. Harper said, her voice filled with admiration. "It's like he understands exactly what we're teaching him." Elena beamed. "He's always been a quick learner. And he loves to show off." As Ignis landed gracefully on the ground, he looked up at Elena, his golden eyes sparkling with excitement. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're amazing," she whispered. "Never forget that." The years passed, and Ignis continued to grow, both physically and emotionally. He became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring people from all walks of life to embrace the extraordinary. The sanctuary expanded, adding new facilities and programs to accommodate the increasing number of visitors. Elena and Daniel remained at the heart of it all, dedicating their lives to ensuring Ignis's happiness and safety. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but they wouldn't have changed a thing. One evening, as the sun set over the sanctuary, Elena stood on the hill overlooking the property. Ignis soared overhead, his wings catching the golden light as he performed loops and dives. The sight took her breath away, just as it had the first time she saw him spread his wings. Daniel joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "He's come a long way," he said. "We all have," Elena replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I never imagined our lives would turn out like this. But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Daniel nodded. "He's changed the world, Elena. And so have you." As they watched Ignis fly, Elena felt a deep sense of gratitude for her son, for the journey they had been on, and for the love that had carried them through every challenge. She knew there would always be obstacles, but she also knew they could face anything together. Ignis let out a triumphant roar, his fiery breath lighting up the evening sky. The sound echoed across the sanctuary, a reminder of the incredible journey they had taken and the bright future that lay ahead. The years rolled on, and Ignis grew into a magnificent creature, standing taller than any human and radiating a regal presence. His wings, now fully developed, cast shadows over the sanctuary as he soared through the sky with confidence and grace. The once small dragon baby who had struggled to hover a few inches off the ground was now a symbol of awe and wonder. Ignis had become a beacon of hope not just for his family, but for the world. His story was taught in schools as an example of perseverance and acceptance, and the sanctuary had grown into an internationally recognized haven for education, science, and community. What had started as a small refuge for Ignis had become a movement that brought people together, united by the belief in embracing the extraordinary. One afternoon, Elena stood at the visitor center, watching a group of schoolchildren file into the sanctuary with their teachers. She smiled as she overheard their excited chatter. "Do you think we'll see him fly? I heard he can breathe fire. Do you think he'll let us pet him?" Elena's heart warmed at their enthusiasm. She had spent years fighting for Ignis to be seen as more than a creature of fear, and now, seeing the joy on these children's faces, she knew the fight had been worth it. As the children made their way to the observation area, Ignis appeared, gliding effortlessly through the air. The crowd erupted into cheers as he performed a loop, letting out a controlled burst of flame that shimmered against the afternoon sun. "Look at him," one of the children exclaimed, clapping their hands. "He's so cool." Elena watched from a distance, tears welling up in her eyes. Seeing Ignis accepted, celebrated, and loved by so many filled her with a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. Despite the sanctuary's success, Elena never forgot the challenges they had faced along the way. She often reflected on the early days of Ignis's life, the fear, the uncertainty, and the unrelenting need to protect him. Those memories were a reminder of how far they had come and the strength it had taken to get there. One evening, as the sanctuary staff prepared for a special event to celebrate Ignis's 10th birthday, Elena took a moment to herself. She sat on a bench overlooking the sanctuary, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow over the property. Ignis approached her, his massive wings folding neatly against his back as he settled beside her. He rested his head on her lap, his glowing eyes filled with affection. "You've grown so much," Elena whispered, running her hand over his warm, scaled head. "I still remember the day you were born, so small and full of fire." I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I would do anything to protect you. Ignis let out a soft rumble, a sound Elena had come to recognize as his way of showing love. She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his, her heart swelling with gratitude. You've taught me so much, Ignis, about love, strength, and the power of being true to yourself. I'm so proud of you. The birthday celebration was a grand affair, attended by hundreds of people from all over the world. The sanctuary was decorated with banners and lights, and a massive cake, made entirely of flame-resistant materials, was placed in the center of the gathering area. Ignis, ever the showman, dazzled the crowd with an aerial performance, his wings cutting through the sky as he released bursts of flame in intricate patterns. The audience watched in awe, their cheers echoing across the sanctuary. As the celebration continued, Elena took the stage to address the crowd. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of smiling faces. 10 years ago, Ignis came into our lives, she began, her voice steady but emotional. He was a miracle, a mystery, and, for some, a source of fear. But he was always so much more than that. He was love, he was hope, and he taught us all what it means to embrace the extraordinary. The crowd erupted into applause, and Elena glanced back at Ignis, who stood proudly behind her. Ignis has changed my life in ways I never could have imagined, she continued. And I know he's touched the lives of so many of you as well. Thank you for being a part of his journey. Together, we've shown the world that being different isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. As the applause grew louder, Ignis stepped forward, letting out a triumphant roar that sent a ripple of warmth through the crowd. Fireworks exploded in the sky above, their bright colors reflecting in Ignis's golden eyes. In the days that followed, the world continued to marvel at Ignis and his story. The sanctuary became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking inspiration, and Elena and Daniel continued to dedicate their lives to educating others about the importance of acceptance and understanding. Ignis, now fully grown, remained the heart of the sanctuary. His bond with Elena never wavered, and he continued to amaze and inspire everyone who met him. Whether soaring through the sky, nuzzling a child, or simply basking in the sun, Ignis was a reminder of the beauty of embracing what makes us unique. One evening, as Elena sat on the porch watching the stars, Ignis joined her, his massive form settling beside her. She rested her hand on his side, feeling the steady warmth of his body. You've done so much, Ignis, she said softly. More than I ever could have dreamed. You've brought people together, changed hearts, and shown the world what it means to be extraordinary. Ignis let out a soft chirp, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. Elena smiled, her heart full. She knew their journey wasn't over, there would always be challenges to face and stories to share. But for now, she was content to sit beside her son, grateful for the love that had carried them this far. As the night deepened, Ignis spread his wings and took to the sky, his silhouette illuminated by the stars. Elena watched him soar, her heart swelling with pride and wonder. He was her miracle, her heart, and her light. And he always would be.